Okay, so today we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff.
I Mein Kampf.
Yeah.
Not exactly a beach read.
No, not at all.
But a lot of you requested this one. And I get it, It's like, how could something like the Holocaust happen? How could someone like Hitler rise to power? And I think to understand that, you kind of have to try to understand his thinking.
Yeah, it's like trying to look into the mind of one of history's most dangerous figures.
Yeah, exactly. And, well, we're not going to read the whole thing. Who has time for that?
Right.
But even these excerpts, I think, they give you a glimpse into this really dark, twisted ideology.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, Mein Kampf, part autobiography, part political rant.
For her?
Right. And volume 1. Hitler's basically trying to connect his own personal struggles, like his time in Vienna, even a stint in prison, to his later political beliefs. It's really disturbing, actually. Like, he tries to make these extreme views seem almost relatable by wrapping them in this personal narrative. And that's something we still see today, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Politicians, even everyday people, like, they can take prejudice and wrap it up in these personal stories and kind of try to make it more palatable.
It's scary how effective that can be. And then in volume 2, he lays out his political agenda. And this is where we get to the whole concept of Lebensraum, which I guess literally translates to living space.
Yeah, but it's a lot more sinister than that.
Oh, yeah.
Lebensraum was really the core of Hitler's whole expansionist ideology. It basically was about justifying the conquest of Eastern Europe, to create this empire for the so-called Aryan race.
And, like, it's crazy to think about the historical context here. I mean, Germany had just lost World War I.
Right.
And the Treaty of Versailles, which a lot of people felt was really unfair, had left the country humiliated and economically devastated.
Exactly. So Hitler was able to tap into that resentment, right?
Yeah.
And kind of twist it. He was saying Germany was destined to rule, that it had been robbed of its rightful place in the world.
And then, of course, woven throughout the whole book, this just horrifying anti-Semitism. He actually talks about the destruction of the Jewish people. It's just sickening to even read those words.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that Hitler didn't invent anti-Semitism. It had been around for centuries, sadly. But he weaponized it in a way that no one had before.
Right.
He presented Jews as this existential threat. He blamed them for Germany's economic problems, for societal ills. He even said they were a threat to the racial purity of the nation.
It's like he took all these existing prejudices and just turned the volume way up.
Yeah, exactly. And, he used propaganda to spread these ideas, right?
Oh, yeah?
He controlled the media, had these massive rallies, and used this very specific language designed to evoke fear and anger. And it makes you think about how powerful words can be, right?
Yeah.
To manipulate, to convince people that their neighbors are the enemy. It's something we're still dealing with today.
Oh, absolutely. And then on top of all the hate, the book also lays out Hitler's vision for a totalitarian state. Like he basically says that democracy is weak and individual freedom is bad for Germany.
Right. He called for Führerprinzip, which means leader principle.
Yeah.
It's basically the idea of complete obedience to a supreme leader himself, of course. And he justified it by saying it was for the good of the nation. So, yeah, all the ideas of individual rights and democracy that we take for granted, completely rejected.
And it's just terrifying to think that these ideas actually resonated with people.
But you have to think about the context, right? I mean, Germany was in a state of crisis. There was hyperinflation, unemployment, political instability. People were desperate for a solution, even if it meant giving up their freedoms.
Yeah. It's like that desperation can make people vulnerable to these extremist ideologies.
Exactly. They're looking for stability. And a strong leader who promises to restore order can be incredibly seductive, even if that order comes at a horrific cost.
And that cost, of course, was World War II and the Holocaust. Like, this wasn't just a book. It was a blueprint for some of the darkest events in human history.
Yeah. And that's really the key takeaway here, right? Mein Kampf was a warning, and the world pretty much ignored it. Like, the ideas in this book, they didn't just stay on the page. They were turned into policy, into action, into violence on a massive scale.
So even though it's hard to stomach, it's important to understand what's in this book, right? It shows us how hate can be twisted into ideology, how personal prejudice can become a political program with these just devastating consequences.
Exactly. And it leaves us with this question, right? A question we all need to think about. How do we make sure that these kinds of ideologies never gain power again? Like, how do we recognize the warning signs? How do we fight intolerance and prejudice before they turn into something truly monstrous?
Heavy stuff. Really heavy stuff. But if we want to build a better future, we have to understand the darkest parts of our past.
Absolutely.
So if you're up for it, I encourage you to learn more about this period in history. There are a ton of amazing resources out there that explore the rise of Nazism and the consequences of that ideology.
For sure. And remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about what led to these horrific events, the better chance we have of preventing them from happening again.
Well said. Well said.
Okay, folks, that's it for this deep dive. Until next time.